So
holy shit, we need to talk about the show.
We really
The
do,
segments.
because listen, I'm 5 glasses into my 14.5% wine, and yeah, right. It's rough. It's what's it hard out here for? Anyway, okay. We watched So You Don't Have To is one of my favorite ideas in theory. When I had to press record and watch Bill Maher, who had been somebody I used to watch him every week for years, back when he was politically incorrect, and then all the way through until about 4 years ago. I was a staunch Bill Maher watcher. My mom still watches him, and I hadn't watched him in years, but I did it, and I feel dirty, but I did it. What's your feeling about the whole Bill Maher from last Friday?
I'm torn because I have to let my cat out.
Oh,
which
Jesus.
is
Yeah, go
which is
Pablo.
because
Pablo.
he's screaming back here, and it's, honestly, we watch this so you don't have to, which is equally as important as me letting my cat out. So
let Pablo go. He was incredibly important at a certain point about 2 decades ago, but I stopped watching him 6 years ago, 5 years ago, when he was really pushing the neoliberal line. So I watched him this past week, and I pressed pause and replay 10 times during the 30-second intro. Like, how dare he show the Black Lives Matter protests with a fist up? What is he trying to do right there, right? Like, that was so offensive to me. There was, I'm just like, okay, the white people shopping with the shopping cart versus the homeless people. This is a guy who does not support Medicare for all or a living wage.
yeah, so for anyone, just to explain, we definitely watched this terrible thing that we all have watched. If you were a progressive, you used to probably at some point think Bill Maher was funny.
Oh yeah.
And then you realized how homophobic, transphobic, racist, Islamophobic, like he hits all the buttons. But you can give that sort of a pass because he's Mr. Comedy Guy. But then once you get past that and you realize he's not Mr. Progressive, you realize how centrist.
Funny.
Well, he's not funny,
Okay.
Which is kind of insulting because he did use my jokes on air. He's used my jokes. He literally used my shit. So that's kind of an insult
he
on
didn't send
me.
you
But
$50 to your.
no, he definitely jacked my shit directly, for the record. But my point is, you realize what a propagandist he is, and so this show that we watched, So You Don't Have To, was pure propaganda, like extreme propaganda. I mean, Paul Begala was on the show. Paul Begala, anything out of his mouth, it like, okay. I don't know if I should jump in.
No, do, because I'm looking at my notes. I was like, furiously for 6 pages here. I have notes.
Okay, so I honestly at this point don't know which person said this. I don't remember.
Yeah,
it was either Paul Begala or Bill Maher himself, and I feel like it was Paul Begala, because he's if you want to know what the propaganda out of the Democratic Party is, what narratives they're going to be pushing, follow Paul Begala, because he is like they trial test the worst things. It's like the worst, like he's just like a little worse than most people will go, but he's saying the things that they want to push. The Democratic Party wants to push these narratives. So I think it was him. It could have been Bill Maher. This is my asterisk. But he said the Nobel Prize for stupidity should go to whoever came up with defund the police.
They are pushing that. The whole Democratic Party is pushing that right now.
Yeah. So a third of the show ish was dedicated to downplaying this idea of defunding the police.
Yep.
I mean, that was a big thing. So like, let's see some more. So, okay. So they talked about Texas. And this is where this is where Paul Begala really shines. He said, you know, Texas has a radical Texas governor. He says, and Democrats are losing support in Texas. And he points out that, you know, Biden, like Hillary had, or Obama had a huge amount of support in the border communities. And Biden, even though he won the border communities, it went from like a 50% majority to like 1% or something.
Right.
It was like neck and neck. And he said, why? And Begala says he talked to voters, and this is where they just pull bullshit out of their ass.
Yeah.
He talked to voters, like,
Right.
you know,
Some guy.
so here's a guy, he's not like saying like we did some polling, even polling's
Right.
bullshit, but he doesn't even have bullshit polling. He's
Right.
just like, we talked to
guy
voters.
I met on the street. Yeah.
Yeah. He's pulling the who's the guy who always met in a coffee shop?
Yeah.
What's that guy's name?
Yeah.
Paul Begala is like the professional, that guy.
I overheard a guy in a coffee shop say.
Yeah. So he's like, okay, so I talked to voters who said all the jobs are in fracking, border patrol, and policing. And you guys are against all of that. So that's why Democrats did worse in those border patrol towns. So in that one little piece of bullshit propaganda, he's saying you should support fracking.
Exactly.
You should be pro border patrol, and you should not be trying to defund the police, which is weird because that's pretty much how Democrats won the election, is saying that they were supporting those things.
I mean,
they were anti-fracking. They were pro defunding, or whatever version of that you want to spin.
Yeah.
You know, but we literally have.
It's such a lie, and mainstream media supports it. They're doing the same thing right now with Eric Adams, who just won in New York. And they're saying, well, there goes your defund the police theory, because there's the guy who's a cop and he won. And Andrew Yang blew his own support because he was trying to act like he was progressive and was clearly not. And the other two progressives were not consistently progressive. But what's happening right now is that mainstream media is going to create this narrative where they say, oh, well, clearly what New York wanted was an anti-defund the police candidate.
To me, this is my perspective. The whole point of that show was twofold. It was to say that defund the police is a narrative we have to get rid of. It's toxic. Like, you can't defund the police if you want to win. That was kind of that was half the spin. You can't know if this is orchestrated or not, but Bill Maher goes into this thing pretending he's like going to attack Joe Manchin.
Right.
And Bill Maher comes out of it saying, you guys should all love Joe Manchin because Joe Manchin votes with us 20% of the time.
We need him there. We need him there, or we wouldn't have.
Whatever. Right. And that, you know, and that all sounds incredibly logical. Like, you know, when you say to people that aren't following all this stuff very closely, which is pretty much Bill Maher's audience, it's like people that are like concerned, but they're not like,
no matter who,
living, they're not living in the weeds and following this stuff. They're just watching HBO for some comedy. And but so those people, they hear that and it makes sense. It's like, okay, so Joe Manchin votes for 30% of Democratic policies. Well, that's 30% more than any Republican would ever vote for. Right. But the problem is the Democratic Party worked their asses off to get Joe Manchin in there because they don't want someone, a progressive can win in that state 100%.
Swearingen would have won if they had
Bernie.
Yeah.
Please educate them on Bernie and the counties.
I mean, here's the thing, and I feel like we need to just pummel this into people's brains. Bernie won 55 of the 55 counties in West Virginia. they want his policies. The whole country wants those policies. We know that they are majority supported. But what the mainstream media is going to keep on doing is saying, oh no, well, it's a very right-wing state and they need Joe Manchin. And what they don't talk about is that state has been so decimated that they don't have clean water. They have sewage running into their water. They don't have schools that are really on any level at where, like, we don't have schools, we don't have water, we don't have air quality. We have people who are working for a substandard living wage. And people get to a point where after a while, and they see the corruption in both parties, a lot of people just disengage. And people who are in the like establishment, the structures of power, they kind of count on that disengagement. I mean, the disenfranchisement of people who vote, that is a winning strategy for people who are already in power. And when Paula Jean was on our show talking about just, and Kaylin Barker also, both of them spoke so eloquently about how when Bernie was running and the people in their state were so grateful that anybody was taking the time to listen to them. We have so decimated our country and we have taken away the hope of anybody. And what that does is it depletes your voting structure, right? We know that 50% of our population doesn't even show up to vote because they know nothing changes, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. And it's something that I know from my liberal friends, it's really upsetting to them. And they like to blame non-voters. But the truth is, non-voters are non-voters because of what's happening in our political infrastructure, right? They're not working for their constituency. So why would anybody show up to vote for them?
So that brings up something I forgot to mention about the Bill Maher show. So one of the critical things that he did, or critical, but I don't know, one of the things I observed him doing a lot was rehab. He never talked about Democrats. He always said liberals. And that was a really interesting thing because he wasn't using it liberals like bad. He was revamping the word liberals, like we're the good people liberals. Like there was please watch the show on that, because I swear to God, 20 liberals instead of Democrats in a good way. He was saying liberals in a good way. So, I mean, that's not that, but that wasn't the thing before. Like, even like if you roll back 6 months ago, he was like, oh, liberals bad. Like, I'm like not a liberal. And now it's like liberals good. We're liberals. Democrats are liberals good.
Yeah. You know what was really fascinating to me? So I'm going to move ahead a little bit on his episode, which was,
thank God.
He's
end it. Please end it.
He's having a difficult time with his audience as a comedian. And he really resents when they don't laugh at his jokes. And he's done this for years, but he blames them, and he has a really antagonistic relationship with his audience. And it's just a funny way to try to build a rapport. I mean, it's like the exact opposite of what you want to do as somebody on stage. And then when he starts talking about cancel culture, and this is the second time now I've seen it, he had Bill Burr on, who didn't bite. He now had Nikki
like 2 months ago or something. Like I saw that episode.
And he was talking about cancel culture. And again, she was like, yeah, you gotta kind of roll with it. Like, you're a comedian, and if people aren't getting it, or if they don't like it, like maybe like shift your vibe. And Bill Burr said the same thing. And it's fascinating to me that he's so hung up on like people not understanding or appreciating his humor that he's going to blame them. Like, and like, I'm an actress. as somebody who is, my whole job is supposed to be to communicate to people, when they're not getting your communication, you gotta, like, that's your fault. You can't blame them. That's
Yeah.
you, right? And it's just such a funny way. He's so angry with his own audience.
So that thing about him has bugged me for years. Like, even when I liked him, it bugged me.
Yeah.
Like, I want to say, I mean, so pre Bernie's run, it was hard to sort of hate him because it was like sort of like we liked Matt, like generally people on the left like Maddow and him at the same time.
Right.
Because you weren't exposed to a lot of the contrast. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying, I'm
I
not
was
saying
one of
everyone.
them.
I wish
No,
I
I
was
was
someone
there.
that saw some of this for what it was before that. But he's always been awful. I mean, like when he says an unfunny joke, the first thing he does is sort of like, I didn't get laughs. Like, you guys must be not PC enough. Like,
Yeah.
you guys are too PC. You
Yeah.
guys are like,
Yeah.
upset. And
Yeah.
I mean, let's just talk about, like, okay, next time you watch him, watch how many times he claps near his mic. Like, I'm not a Hollywood person. I don't know mics. I don't know setup, but
Yeah.
it's annoying. He claps near his mic. You always hear his clap.
Yeah.
And he insults his audience. He has so much disdain for his audience.
Crazy to see that, right?
It like, it's crazy. Like, yeah, I don't know how anyone could like him.
I mean, again, and not like, okay, so now I'm like, because of my OCD and trying to like thread the needle here, but like the opposite of what we're trying to do. I don't know if you can hear my phone telling me I have a low battery, but that's what's happening. But right, we're like punch up, right? You punch up to the people who are in power. And what he's doing is blaming his audience for not finding his lame jokes funny. It's so weird. And then to have comedian after comedian on his show to try to get him, like, to pull them onto his side, and they don't bite. I mean,
Right.
Bill Burr and Nikki Glaser were like, nope, it's fine. Just
Bill Burr.
Yeah.
Bill Burr really didn't want to tolerate his bullshit. He
Not at all.
pushed back good. Like,
And so did Nikki Glaser. They were both just like, no, that's not it. Like, be funnier. I mean, just be funnier.